Welcome everyone to our first episode. Today I'm thrilled to be joined by Jiri Fiala, CEO of PrivID. Thank you for being here, Jiri. Thank you for your time. So
No
just
problem,
to
Maxime.
start, I see that you talk a lot about quantum crypto. I think it's a big
Mhm.
deal that it's coming up for 2030 that you talk about. What is it?
Oh, Jesus, that is a loaded question.
Hey,
Um, Basically, the bottom line is this: Europe and Canada have both mandated that by 2030,
yeah,
organizations need to be in a position to handle quantum computing as a threat.
okay,
So they need to reassess their cybersecurity posture insofar as what works and what will work against quantum computers.
okay,
So that's where a technology like ours comes in because our technology is based on the idea that quantum computers are already here. And so, we work in that kind of domain where um, the encryption process that we use doesn't really give a quantum computer an advantage over the average system that tries to brute force your technology. Will it stop um, social engineered things like man in the middle attacks or a fake email or something like that? Unfortunately, we can't stop that from happening, but we can mitigate the damage.
okay. And the old crypto doesn't connect with the new systems, so that's why you need to bring in a new one for it to be protected.
Well, we advocate right now, we're advocating more of a hybrid model because we're not going to tell people and organizations to throw out something they've invested millions in,
For sure.
right? Much as we would like to, we're
Mhm.
not going to. But we will work with an organization right now to migrate over to a more quantum safe cybersecurity platform and posture. Because what's going to happen is the mandate starts effectively 2026, and that's around the corner. But you're going to have organizations that are going to wait until 2028, 2029 before they actually start to do anything. That's going to be too late because of the way cybersecurity needs to migrate. You can't just turn one system off and turn another one on. That just doesn't work. As much as we would like that to be the case, it just doesn't. So, in order for an organization to really start the migration process and to really be ready for 2030, they need to talk about that sort of thing, well, now, so they can start getting everything in place in 2026.
Okay. And with your company, you're basically positioning yourself to do that move into the hybrid, like you just said, with the old and new, and then translate into the new one.
Yeah, yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we can run what we advocate more than anything else is initially running the old system and then running a system like ours
Mhm.
um, in a very specific area of the organization. What area that is can be determined between us and the organization because every organization is going to have a slightly different perspective on that. And then once it's running perfectly well in that area and everybody's used to it, then we expand to the next area, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Ultimately, everybody is more comfortable with the process that way, as opposed to walking in, turning the lights off, and then turning the lights back on, but the lights are completely different.
Pretty much.
You know.
And did you got any big lessons? Because you probably implemented it at some point, maybe in your business or somewhere. Is there a lesson that you got from that navigating these systems in your business or in any businesses in general?
Well, yeah, we have. Excuse me.
Okay.
Um, when we started this technology, we started working on this technology, just to give you a background, um, about 7.5, 8 years ago. Nobody had even heard of it at that time. Everybody looked at us when we talked about that sort of thing, like, yeah, it's nice. It's you guys can go sit over there in the corner because nobody's really going to talk to you. They weren't wrong. Nobody wanted to talk to us because nobody understood what it was we had.
Hmm.
Now, as more and more organizations and governments and systems are being breached by not just your average hacker, but by state-sponsored hacking groups, like Fancy Bear or APT28, as they're also known, out of Russia. That's a prime example. They're state-sponsored, and they're very smart. They're very good, and they can hack a lot of systems that, quite frankly, people think are bulletproof, and they do. And they use a variety of ways to do it. So how do you protect against that? You've got a known weak spot, so you've got to protect against it. And in most organizations, the weak spot is that they use what's called privileged access accounts. And they use what's called the encrypt decrypt model, where in order to work on technology or in order to work on a document or whatever that's encrypted, you have to decrypt it first and then work on it, then re-encrypt it again.
Okay.
So and that's a cumbersome process, right? It really takes a lot of time, and that period where you've got the encryption, decryption, and decryption encryption system going is a weak spot.
Mm.
And then factor in the social engineering component of man-in-the-middle attacks and how we are conditioned to just accept emails from positions of authority, et cetera, et cetera. All of those are weak spots. So how do we, and how does our system help with that? Well, that's where we kind of looked at things that had already been around, but nobody had been using. And in one case, part of our technology, zero knowledge protocol, has been around since 1985 when it was first discovered at MIT.
Okay.
Right? It's being used in ZK cache. I mean, everybody's heard of them, ZK cache, ZK Stark, ZK Snark. People have heard that, but nobody knew what ZK was, right? It was zero knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And so what they did is they had already been using it to a certain extent under certain areas in the crypto world, in the cryptocurrency world. And so we looked at, okay, what's the benefit to this? And we realized, well, one of the benefits is that you can authenticate yourself without actually giving away what you are, who you are, and any personal data. So, and the other nice thing about it is that when you use ZK, Zero Knowledge Protocol, ZKP, in your system, nobody can duplicate that. Nobody can duplicate your identity in the system if you're logged in already. So with a password, if I'm logged into one system with a password, I can log into any other system with the same password and identity, and I don't have to necessarily log out of that other system. Mm-hmm. Right? That doesn't work with ZKP. If you're logged into one system within an organization with ZKP access, and somebody tries to log you in, or you log yourself, or try to log yourself into another computer on that same system without first logging off the other one, it won't allow you to do it. It will basically stop you. And in order for that to happen, you've got to log out of the other system and log into the other system with the credentials. And that is very specific. And we can limit that to certain things. We can limit it from a time perspective. We can limit it from a whole bunch of different areas. So that the concept of the privileged access account, which has global access across the whole thing, just doesn't exist anymore. Right? So, which is one of the big weak spots in organizations, because once you have a privileged access account, you can access whatever the hell you want, and nobody can do anything about it. And there's no reason. Even me, as the CEO and founder of the company, I don't need to access every single system within the organization. I just don't. Right? But because of the privileged access account, I've got access to everything.
And how did you guys? Oh, go ahead.
No, and I said, likewise, the sysadmin can do the same thing. I mean, the sysadmin has access to everything, but there's no reason for them to have that access. There just isn't. So that's part one. Then about the decrypt, re-encrypt, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera thing. With fully homomorphic encryption, or FHE, because, well, fully homomorphic encryption is a mouthful and it hurts to say. Nothing gets decrypted. You're working on encrypted data all the time. So nothing is decrypted. All you have on the data that you're working on is a specific window into the portion that you're working on. And it gets authenticated. We can use ZKP for further authentication of the information. And that's it. That's basically the system in a nutshell. Now, I've simplified it tremendously, but that's basically how it works.
And how did you guys find out that technology 7 to 8 years ago, and just now it's starting to like come up? You said all the attacks from other countries, but why and is it been so long and the change haven't been different? Technology grows so fast and it's still the way to go right now.
Well, here's the answer that nobody wants to talk about.
Ah,
Technology hasn't changed.
okay.
The cybersecurity protocols and cybersecurity platforms that you're using today are the same ones that they started using in the 80s and the 90s. Nothing's changed. They've added fancy names to it. They've given it a fancy new look, that sort of thing, and they've added additional protocols. But at the end of the day, if you look at very carefully what the requirements are for that technology today versus what they were in the 90s, there's no difference. There's none whatsoever. It's a little bit more complex and a little bit fancier to the average individual. But at the end of the day, it's the same technology. We're still using RSA. We're still using ECC. Nothing has really changed. And that's one of the reasons why it's so easy to break into these systems. Because nothing's changed, right? And the hackers know it. They know it. So what you need to do is look at cybersecurity from a completely different perspective, and that's what we did. And we did it because we weren't cybersecurity experts. We just weren't. I was a recruiter. I worked in the IT sector, working with IT people and so on. But so I understood technology because I was a programmer in the past. But was I a cybersecurity expert? No, not by any stretch of the imagination. But that's what gave us our insight more than anything else, because we didn't think like a standard cybersecurity expert that has been conditioned to think a certain way because of what you've been taught. Right? And that's the critical thing. People think a certain way because they've been taught to think a certain way. And when you present them with a circumstance, answer, whatever you will, that will force them to look at something differently, it becomes challenging because it kind of negates everything that they've been taught, and it goes against what they've been taught, even though technically it doesn't. But because it's still at the end of the day, it accomplishes the same thing. It just does it from a slightly different perspective and a slightly different way, right? And this is the one thing I tell everybody that I work with in our organization, and I say this is the mantra that we are going up against every single day. And it was a gentleman named Upton Sinclair who said this way back in the 1800s. He said, ironically, you cannot make somebody understand something if their salary depends upon them not understanding it. Right?
Yep.
It's a really simple statement, and it sounds sarcastic as hell, and it probably is.
Yep.
But it's 100% accurate. And this is the thing that we've been fighting against for 7 years, is the inertia of that kind of thinking. If you've read the articles that I write, I talk about it as the inertia of apathy. And that's not going to win me a lot of votes in terms of the cybersecurity community, but it is an inertia of apathy because everybody is apathetic about what's coming 5 years from now. They're more concerned about how to stop Maxim from screwing up the system today. they're not looking what's going to screw up my system 5 years from now. As far as they're concerned, that's the other guy's headache.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be here in 5 years. I don't care. That's not my problem. That's the other guy's headache, right? But they're wrong, because it's your headache today. Because here's what's going to happen: your system's going to get breached. You may not even know it. They're going to steal your data, and they're going to worry about decrypting it later. And at the end of the day, yeah, it's the other person's, 5 years from now, it's going to be their problem, but you're the one that's going to be responsible for that. You may not be there at that time, but it's going to be your responsibility.
Yeah.
So today, your response, the average cybersecurity person within an organization, whatever you want to call them, the sysadmin, whatever you want, everybody's got a different name for them. So we just kind of call them a crypto security expert. Their job is not just education, not just setting the system up for what's going to happen today or tomorrow or next week, but creating a system that is going to be resilient over the next 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. Right. And that's, again, where the inertia of apathy comes in. We have to get over that. We have to educate these people in terms of being aware that this is what's going to be happening. And that's what we've been fighting against for 7 years. Now, finally, people are starting to see the light. So that's where we are now. People are finally starting to wake up to what we've been doing for the last 7 years. Does that put us ahead? Absolutely, it does. Yep. When we started working with FHE, to encrypt something took like minutes to do. Today we've got it down to milliseconds because of what we've been working on and because of what others have been working on. And yeah, I don't hide the fact that we, a lot of the stuff that is being worked on, that has been worked on with FHE, to a certain extent, is available in the open source world. And we've taken that and we've made our own modifications. So therefore, our system is actually, even if an organization starts today, they can get to where we are in about 2 years, 3 years, where we are today. So we're already that much further ahead. So working with an organization like ours actually makes sense, because you're going to save yourself a lot of that time and money in terms of research, where, you bring in an organization like ours, we're already there. We've done the research. We've done the things that you're just thinking about today.
Yeah.
And so that is what puts us ahead.
And talking about what people are thinking today, we'll bring the big subject, which is AI. So is it usually a big clash where you'll try to bring it crypto in, but people will mostly just want to talk about how can I put in AI instead of thinking about the future where crypto will be what I'll need instead of just an AI system that does X, Y, and Z?
Well, AI needs to be talked about.
Yeah.
Because AI is being used, is being used and will be used to breach systems.
Yeah.
Because AI can do things faster
Absolutely.
than the average human can.
Yeah.
Now, AI is also a double-edged sword, right? It can do things better and faster than a human can under certain circumstances, but it can also screw up better and screw up more than a human can under those same circumstances.
Yeah.
So you've got to figure out what you want to use the AI for. There are a lot of organizations that are implementing AI simply for the sake of implementing AI.
Yeah.
Is there a reason for that, for them to be using it? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Does it look good to whomever is giving them something for it? Absolutely. But Does it add anything to it except a layer of complexity? No, no. What we advocate, I mean, we have no problem with AI, but our preference is to advocate for our clients a private large language model, which is basically a private AI system that you use in-house,
Yeah.
not an external system that's publicly available where all of your searches and all of your questions and all of your whatever you've been putting into it
Hmm.
are ultimately publicly available to virtually anybody that chooses to look for it.
Yes.
Right. Google is now stating outright that anything that you've put into its AI is publicly available.
Hmm.
Okay. Yeah, sure, you have to know how to search for it, but at the end of the day, it's still publicly available.
Yeah.
That kind of flies in the face of cybersecurity because if it's publicly available, it's not secure.
No.
Right. I mean, that's the bottom line. So using AI in cybersecurity, especially if it's a public AI, that just doesn't work. But a private large language model server that you have in-house that specifically is trained for internal systems
Hmm.
as an internal AI
Hmm.
for security and so on, yes, we advocate for that. As a matter of fact, we will happily integrate that into the system for you. But a publicly available one, no, that's got to be a separate that's got to be a separate system altogether, and it can't be attached to the secure system that you're talking about internally,
And have
right?
you saw any businesses using the public one, putting security things in it from your consulting, from what you saw or heard?
Uh,
Yes and no.
I refuse to answer that on the grounds it may incriminate me.
Ah, for
So,
sure it happened. It's just,
of course it happens.
you
I mean,
know,
of course it happens because you know what? Here's the thing. It's AI is not new.
no.
Okay. It's not a new technology. It's been around for decades.
Mhm.
It's been around for a long, long time. And Google has been using it forever. I mean, one of their top people was Jeffrey Hinton, the grandfather of AI, an ex-University of Toronto professor, right? He's famous for being one of the main people to use AI within an organization. But even he advocates for being careful with how you use AI.
Mhm.
And but the problem is, like anything else, nobody ever listens to him.
No.
Nobody will listen because everybody thinks, oh, I've got a better solution, I've got a better this, and he doesn't know what he's talking about. What do you mean he doesn't know what he's talking about? If it wasn't for him, you wouldn't have the system you've got today.
Hmm.
He knows more than anybody what he's talking about. But everybody sees him as a doomsayer now, right? So AI has value.
Yeah.
AI can be implemented in an organization. It just has to be done carefully and strategically.
Hmm.
You can't just say, I'm using AI.
Yes.
Okay, great. If you tell me you're using AI, what are you using it for? Tell me
Mhm.
now. What is it that you're using it for that makes it so special?
Yeah.
And 90% of the time, an organization that is implementing AI will tell me what they're using it for. I have to I have to I turn my camera off because I don't want them seeing me do this. Um,
Yeah,
and then I turn my camera back on and we have a conversation about that.
for sure.
Right. Sometimes I'll even turn my mic off so they don't hear me swearing at what is, but uh, I digress, and I have probably said too much about my next meeting.
And do you see maybe if you implement AI into the private part, do you still need to put crypto into it? Is that something that's going to merge together at some point?
Always,
Always?
always, always. And here's one of the things that you got to realize. Even if it's a private system,
Yeah.
it needs to be secure
Hmm.
more than anything else, especially if you're talking about a system like AI.
Yeah.
That requires security. It requires access that's secure. it requires verifiable access because you need to know what is being done. And that data, even though it's on a private system, needs to stay safe and secure.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just because it's a private LLM does not mean it can't and shouldn't have some sort of security attached to it.
Hmm. And that's maybe future. It's already getting implemented all together, all working fine. Like, I don't really know how it's gonna work here because we talked a bit earlier how you open the message with the encryptions. So how is that gonna be working with AI if you just chat with it or if you just put stuff into it?
Well, like I said, on a private, on a private AI system,
Yeah.
you're going to be setting it up in such a way that when people access the information, they're accessing the AI internally. You
Yeah.
just want to make sure that that information doesn't go out to the rest of the world. So you want to air gap that from the external world. Okay, you want to keep it internal. So even though it's internal and potentially quote unquote air gapped, and I use quote unquote because in one sense it is, in another sense it isn't really because it's part of the internal network. So it still means that access has to be protected.
Yeah. Okay.
And right, so you don't necessarily encrypt the AI per se,
Mhm.
but you protect the access to it.
Access.
Right. And so that's where it's got to get very, very specific. It's got to be very, very carefully thought out. And it has to be something that is implemented very, very strategically. It can't just be, you can't just walk in and turn on the server, right? I mean, yeah, well, you do, but my point
At
being,
some point.
yeah, you do. But my point being that because it's internal, you're teaching it internally on your organization's information. So we can respond much better internally to questions that are internal to the organization, right?
Yep.
Not questions that are external to the organization. That's a whole different one. You can use a separate AI for that, but you can't have it connected to the internal one,
Okay.
right? So yeah, they're always, 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 and I'm looking at this from the perspective of the idea, hey, just because I'm paranoid doesn't mean they're not after me, right? So that's kind of the perspective that we take as well.
Perfect. And for any AI, is there something that's working for you right now and something that is super frustrating, not working at all in the industry? Like, don't even think about that. Next thing.
And we just talked about it. I mean, people forget that they can use a private AI versus a public AI,
Mm.
and that's the most frustrating component of it. That right now, I would have to say 99.9999999% of organizations are using a public AI,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
Yeah, and it's a very small percentage that is using a private AI, and I think it's largely got to do with they think it's too expensive. They think it's too time consuming, and I mean, I'm not going to deny it; it is time consuming.
Mhm.
Um, because you've got to train that AI, right?
Yeah.
So you've got to train it on your organization, your internal stuff. So it's not something that's going to happen overnight. But the other side of it is, I think a lot of organizations have just forgotten they can do that.
Mm.
That's it.
Hmm. And
So
how long does it take? Approximately like 3 months to be actually good into the business ish.
depend
Depends
it
on.
it it depends upon the business,
Okay.
right? You it can. I mean, for our purposes internally,
Mhm.
um, 6 7 months was a baseline for training. But
Okay.
the simple fact of the matter is, our system is our internal private LLM is still being trained on our system because we're constantly looking at new things. We're constantly finding new ways to do things. We're constantly finding new approaches and so on. So it's constantly undergoing training. There is no end point
Yeah.
to it from our perspective, right? But the initial training to get it up to speed to where we really found it useful was 6, 7 months.
Hmm. I think people sometimes forget that the only thing is gonna implement and in like 5 minutes is gonna do everything
Yeah.
and not thinking about you have to like train it, you have to like put stuff in it, you have to make it know who you are, what your business is, and go
Mhm.
all around it, and then it's gonna do something after 3, 4, 5 months. People
Yep.
always you probably see it in your consulting meeting with companies where they just want to implement it and they want it right now, and it's like yes, but no.
But one of the things, yeah, it's true. But one of the things that to give you an example, one of the things we find really shocking, even though we know, here's the funny part. We knew this going in, but we still find it shocking. The amount of large scale organizations that run a lot of their stuff on an Excel spreadsheet,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
And so um, that is not surprising, but it's still a shock.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when I mean, we're talking to an organization right now. We actually have just signed a contract with them, and they're a global organization. Their entire logistics and shipping platform for their entire global system is run on an Excel spreadsheet.
Hmm. Yep.
You
Technology
know,
is way above that.
I mean, this is the thing. When they first told us that, when they first told us that this is what they did, um, we had to stop from laughing because, and then they were worried about the fact that somebody is taking that information. I'm like, yeah, no shit, you're running on an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah. It's like
You
easy.
know,
Yeah.
so anyway, but we're working with them to sort that out, and that will be sorted out. But it's again one of those things where you know we understand that there are organizations and there are philosophies within organizations that have them still thinking,
Mm.
20, 30 years ago in terms of their cybersecurity. We understand that. And we know that's not going to change. We can't help that. What our 90% of our job, ironically, is education.
Yeah.
You
Mm-hmm.
know, getting them to think in the modern cryptographic world,
Mm-hmm.
not the world from 30, 40 years ago. And the world from 30, 40 years ago and if you've been in the military, you understand this concept. It's ticking boxes,
Yeah.
right? You
Yep.
tick boxes, you tick a box, you tick a box, and so on. There's no, but that's also the problem
Yeah.
because everybody knows all you've done is tick a box.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody knows that once you tick that box, well, that compliance is there. Is it really though? It looks good on paper, but is it reality?
Yeah.
And so we don't look for tick boxes. Our system doesn't work that way.
Mm.
I mean, ultimately in the future, it probably will,
Yeah.
because that's just the nature of the beast, right?
Yeah.
But no, our job is to more or less get organizations to think differently about how they view cybersecurity. And that means getting rid of the tick box compliance
Mm-hmm.
and looking at the reality of how things are.
Yeah.
The, the attackers don't use tick boxes. They don't use it. They're not going to check a box and so on, say, okay, I did this, I did that. That's just not how it works, right? And so the defense system can't be working in that way. It just can't. So what we do is we go in, we educate,
Mm-hmm.
then then we talk to them about how we can implement our system within their system in a strategic way that allows them to continue working,
Mm-hmm.
manage the internal transition, and we'll help them with that as well.
Yeah.
But all of that takes time, effort, and money.
Mm-hmm.
right? So that brings me to the critical thing. Are we the cheapest solution out there? No.
No.
If you want a tech, if you want a solution that's going to tick boxes and so on, that's a cheap solution.
Yeah.
And but here's the reality. That cheap solution is also what's going to cause your company to get breached.
Mm.
And every single one of your partners in the next 12 months is going to get breached as a result of your being breached.
Yeah.
So guess what that's going to do? It's going to open you up to a bunch of lawsuits.
Hmm.
Because if they can trace it back to you not doing something, even though you ticked all the boxes, well, you've got a lawsuit waiting to happen.
Yeah. And that's gonna
You
be more
know,
expensive than just paying the service where it's gonna be protected for sure, and it's not gonna go into the breach.
exactly. And on top of that, factor in GDPR and PIPEDA and all the different, because in Europe, especially, if you have, they're very heavily regulated for privacy and encryption and so on.
Okay.
So you've got to show them that you comply with their various GDPR, NIS2, et cetera, directives,
Mm, okay.
right? And if you don't, and you don't follow their protocols, that becomes very expensive.
Mm,
Because if a breach happens and you haven't followed their various protocols, and they're not necessarily all checkbox, you just have to follow their protocols. That can run you up to 4% of your global income,
hmm,
right? Not the income within the country where you were breached, but your global income. And this is why companies like Google, Amazon, and so on, under GDPR, have been fined billions of euros.
hmm.
Okay, granted, I mean, when you're $1 trillion company, that's
Eh,
that's a parking ticket, right?
yeah, yeah, pretty much.
But the bottom line is this is what happens. And for a smaller organization,
Yeah,
those kinds of fines can mean the difference between being here today and not being here tomorrow.
pretty much. Yeah.
So yeah, are we a little on the expensive side? Absolutely. But can we save you that fine that
Hmm.
can mean the difference between you being out of business tomorrow? Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely we can.
Which is supposed to be the goal for a cybersecurity business.
Well, I mean, that is the goal, right, ultimately. But ultimately, our goal more than anything else is not keeping your business from going bankrupt. That's part one. But the main goal that we see that we protect above everything else is trust.
Mm,
We protect the trust of your users, your business partners, and your employees to keep their data safe.
yeah.
And that's the crux of everything we do, maintaining the trust for that organization.
Hmm.
And without that, you don't have much really to go on when it comes to working with partners, working with clients, and working with your internal people. Right? If they can't trust that you're going to keep their data safe, why should they stay there?
Pretty much. And looking forward in the next 6 to 12 months, what's the future for PrivID? What is it gonna look like technology-wise, growth-wise? What's the big plans?
Growth wise, it's going to be it's going to be pretty huge growth wise. Um, we are just now, for lack of a better term, hitting critical mass. Um, so we're getting more and more interest from a lot of organizations, and as a result of that, we're going to be bringing in a lot more people
Mm,
to help with that. Um, the simple fact of the matter is our growth projections over the next 18 to 24 months, we're looking at about 200 to 300%
okay. My God.
growth just in terms of the people that we need,
Mhm.
right, for this. Um, so it's pretty heavy in terms of where we're going to be expanding. And our primary target is EMEA, because they're going very much into a sovereignty. perspective. So you've got to be located within Europe to be considered a European solution. You've got to be located within Canada to be considered a Canadian solution. You've got to be located within wherever to be considered a whatever solution.
Mhm.
So currently, our offices are in Canada and Europe.
Okay.
And so we take care of both of those areas. And we're seeing a lot of, because of the 2030, a lot more people are becoming interested in how can they ensure they're compliant for 2030. Ironically, not so much here in Canada, because people, for whatever reason, companies are forgetting that Canada also has that 2030 directive,
Hmm.
right? Europe has been more open about it. Canada, in its typical quiet way, has not been as open about it, but it's still there. The mandate is still there.
Hmm.
So Canadian organizations have to be prepared for that. But European organizations, they've set a specific timeline, specific deadlines for what needs to happen. And this is why we're positioned very well, because
Yeah.
our organization we've done this. We know what the steps are. We know what is going to take you from where you are now to be quantum ready. And RSA, ECC, they're just not going to cut it in the future.
Hmm. I understand. That's a nice future plan. It's coming up pretty good for you.
Yeah, I mean, look, things can change tomorrow,
For sure.
right? And as many people have famously said, all the planning in the world is goes out the window as soon as you hit that, as soon as you get that first punch in the face.
Always.
Um, right.
Yeah.
So it really, we can plan a whole bunch of things, but realistically, the strongest thing that we've got going for us is our ability to adapt.
Yeah.
Right. We are 100% remote organization. We
Mhm.
have people in Canada, we have people in Brazil, we have people in Europe, we have people in Africa. So it doesn't matter where, we can handle the situation.
Mm.
And our growth is just going to be, where we focus our growth is going to be determined upon which area is going to be the most active. It could be more Europe and Canada, could be more Europe, Africa, could be more Africa, Canada. We don't know. But because we're remote and we're quite agile,
Mhm.
to us, where the growth happens is pretty much irrelevant. We've got, we've already taken things into account.
Yeah.
So, and how to manage our resources. Um, what's our real goal? Our real goal is to make our technology the standard
Mhm.
for quantum security in a post-quantum world. We would like to see our technology being the new standard
Mm.
for it. You know, but that's going to take that's going to take people to think really differently, and that's why I write the articles I write, is education.
Yeah.
You
I
know,
think I already have the answer of my last question. But if you had to snap your finger and solve one major challenges in your space, I'm pretty sure you're gonna go with crypto, but maybe it's something else. What would it be?
honestly, um, I said it at the very beginning. The the inertia of apathy.
Mm.
That's it. That's the critical thing. It comes down to that, because everybody's comfortable in terms of what they know, but that worked 30 years ago. It doesn't work today.
100% I like the answer. So that was it, Jerry. That was the first
Okay.
podcast for me. Really like your time. Thank you for being here and your insights and your expertise. So that's gonna be it for today.
Likewise. Thanks very much, Maxim. And you know what? Good job on the podcast.
Thank you.